Does this model have innovative features and amazing detail? Is it really hard to work on? Is it booby-trapped? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi, and today I'm reviewing an HO scale SD60F locomotive from Aurora Miniatures. My model is decorated for Canadian National in the stripe scheme. This special edition model of CN5543 is only offered with DCC and sound for $299.99 direct from the Aurora Miniatures online store. We'll start the model at 100 possible points. The model comes in a sturdy cardboard box. Inside, a plastic cradle protects the model. A decal sheet with optional small markings is included, along with a manual with DCC and other information. The model is secured to the bottom part of the cradle with a pair of Phillips screws. A bag of spare parts was taped to the cradle. I'm not a fan of boxes like this one that hold the model with screws, but the box should still do a good job protecting the model for storage and transport. General Motors Diesel, EMD's Canadian operation, built a total of 64 SD60F units for Canadian National between 1985 and 1989. Units numbered from 5504 to 5563 were class GF638B on the CN. The SD60F was a Canadian variant of the EMD SD60 with a full-width cowl body and wide cab. The body design included the Draper Taper, an angled section behind the cab for improved visibility to the rear. These units could be found throughout the CN system and sometimes ventured into the US. CN retired the units in 2017. My unit, 5543, was the last unit to be retired from active service. I compared the models to photos I found of the real 5543 online, and as best I can tell, it looks to be spot on. The overall appearance of this unit didn't seem to change much over the years, so this model should do a good job representing the engine from the late 80s through 2017. The paint on the model is opaque and evenly applied. It's thin enough not to obscure any details. Even with all those stripes on the sides and so many places where something could be a little off, the separation lines between the colors are sharp and I couldn't find any voids. Aurora did an excellent job with the paint. One very minor nit, if I had to find one, is that the stripes are shinier than the rest of the model. This is hard to see with my studio lights, but you can see it in person. When I get around to weathering the model, I usually start with a clear flat spray, and that should even things out. The cab has thin metal sunshades. The side windows don't appear to be openable. Aurora also did a nice job capturing the shape of the Draper Taper. The non-operating side doors have clear glazing and you can see through to the other side. The view is partially obstructed by the mechanism, but it's a cool effect. I like the louver detail on the rear of the left side of the unit. The trucks have a lot of detail, including brake lines and flexible sander lines. The right side rear truck has really neat brake chain detail. Some of the axles have rotating end caps as appropriate. In front, the model has a cab-mounted bell, freestanding grab irons, and separately applied windshield wipers. The handrails appear to be made of plastic and are flexible enough to resist moderate handling. The pilot has uncoupling levers and hoses. The plow appears to match the prototype photos, though in most of the photos I found the stripes are so dirty that they're barely visible. The pilot steps are see-through. In back, the detail level is similar to the front. The model has the Canadian-style single-beam rear headlight. There is no plow in this end, but the pilot does have spare knuckle holders. On top, the cab has freestanding antennas. The dynamic brake grid is nicely rendered. There's a nice horn casting, and the exhaust is open so that you can see into it. The radiator fans have see-through grills and individual blades, even the one that's partially hidden by the winterization hatch. The radiator grills are also see-through. It's hard to see since everything is painted black, but there's detail inside. Underneath, the model has nice detail under the sills. The truck gearboxes are formed in such a way as to resemble individual traction motors on each axle. The trucks have metal wheels with a standard RP25 tread profile. All the axles are powered and all the wheels pick up current. The model has plastic knuckle couplers on both ends. Looking for a match on the horizontal center line, the front coupler is low, so I'm taking 5 points. The rear coupler is also low. All of the wheels are in gauge according to the NMRA standards gauge, though a couple of the wheel sets were tight in the gauge. It's probably not enough to cause problems, but it's something to be aware of. There is no body wobble. The model weighs 21.9 ounces. Drawbar pull topped out at 3.7 ounces on my force gauge, a little better than average for an HO scale diesel of this size. The model starts and runs very smoothly. F1 rings the bell. F2 sounds the horn. The length of the toot depends on how long the F2 key is pressed. F8 turns on the sound as well as the number boards. F0 turns on the headlight, which is directional. The front headlight comes on when the model is set to move forward, and the rear headlight comes on in reverse. F6 turns on the ditch lights. F5 cycles the class lights through various colors. F11 turns on the radiator fans and also plays the fan noise if the sound is on. This is neat, though there is some gear noise when the fans are spinning. After the model is powered off, it makes a low ticking noise for a few seconds. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but it is a little unusual. The model has step and truck lights, which is really neat. These are on by default but can be turned off with F13. The truck lights are very dim and I wasn't able to show them on video, but they are there. F22 turns on the cab lights. It's a little hard to see, but there's an instrument panel light inside the cab. F4 activates the dynamic brake noise. F9 turns on the full throttle feature. This freezes the prime mover sound at the current level, unlinking it from the throttle setting. This can be used to simulate a heavy train starting out in run 8, or an engine that is coasting. The manual says F10 is an independent brake. This makes a noise but doesn't actually stop the engine. Many other Loc-Sound equipped models will do this, so I suspect it's a programming issue. The model has a capacitor circuit that will keep it running for a few seconds if it loses power. That'll help the model over areas of dirty track. With the sound off, the model is pretty quiet. The area of the roof just behind the cab lifts off, so be careful not to pick up the model by this part. This allows access to the light board with the 21-pin Loc-Sound 5 decoder. If you wanted to change the decoder, or if you had a DCC ready version of this model from an older run, this is where you'd install the 21-pin decoder of your choice. To attempt to fix the coupler height, first I'll remove the couplers. The draft gearbox is an unusual design and can't be pulled through the pilot. The pieces have to be extracted from behind. This design is also going to make it extremely difficult to fix the coupler height. Usually I file the mounting pad, but in this case the height of the pilot opening and the height of the mounting pad aren't the same. The mounting pad is recessed further up, so I'll have to take the model apart to file it. I'll have to file the pilot opening and also the top of the weird draft gearbox in order to move things up, since the top of this touches the bottom of the sill. With the springs removed, the boxes will fit Katie whisker couplers, but the height is still way too low. This is where the desire to have a near scale size coupler box opening runs up against practicality. I would much prefer a more conventional draft gearbox design. It shouldn't be this difficult to fix the coupler height, so I'm taking 5 points per coupler. To remove the shell, in addition to removing the couplers, I need to disconnect the ribbon cable that's accessible from the roof hatch. The shell takes some gentle coaxing to dislodge. Be very careful with this chassis. There are a couple of very sharp metal parts that project over the fuel tank area. These are very hard to see. I pricked my thumb on one and it drew blood. I don't like it when my model trains are booby trapped, so I'm taking 5 points. Inside the shell, the motor and mechanism that drives the fans is visible, as well as some stick-on weights on the sides. To fix the coupler height, I'm going to start by filing the mounting pads. I'll also need to file the top of the draft gearbox. I don't want to have to take this model apart and put it back together multiple times while fixing the couplers, so I've mounted the KD158s and draft gearboxes to the chassis without the shell to test the coupler height. I'll use a new sharp number 11 blade to remove some material from the tops of the pilot openings. When putting the model back together, be careful of the sander lines. They're flexible but can easily get caught between the frame and the body. Thankfully, the couplers were still correct after I got the shell back on. It's a good idea to test the engine after it's reassembled to make sure everything still works. So I kind of have mixed feelings about this model. On the one hand, it's incredibly detailed. It looks really cool. It's a unique model. I don't think anyone else has produced one of these in plastic before. And Aurora did a really fantastic job, I think, nailing it in terms of the prototype accuracy and that kind of thing. I'm not a Canadian national modeler, but these look really neat, and I'm looking forward to running it on my Donner layout. I did have a couple of things I wanted to talk about. One is the rotating fans. I had a friend once who was always after me to do that with a model, like, making the Canon fans that I use on a lot of my diesel builds actually operate. And I was always kind of hesitant because I was like, I was thinking, there's a couple different ways to do that. It's like you could put some kind of a gear drive with one motor like Aurora did on this model. The downsides of that are, one, you have to build a gear train. Two, the gear train can be a little noisy, which the Aurora model has that issue to a degree, although it's not bad. And the other thing is that the fans are all going to spin at exactly the same speed. The other route to go would be to put an individual motor on each fan. And then, of course, they could be independently controlled, but it still becomes a logistical issue of like, fitting all of that plus a sound decoder, plus a speaker, plus all the other stuff, lights and everything else inside a model, making it work reliably, and also having them work at a realistic speed, which is something I give credit to Aurora for, because the fans rotate slow enough so that you can see the blades moving, which is really nice, because I've seen some animations of fans that other people have done, and a lot of times they spin so fast it's like a blur, like you put the blade in a motor tool, and that's not what I've seen when I've been, the few times that I've been elevated and been able to see the fans on a real engine. They tend to rotate at a relatively low speed, so at least from what I've seen. So I think it's more realistic. So I think Aurora did a good job with that. They also set it up exactly like I would have, where it's tied to the radiator fan sound that Loxan builds into their decoders. I think that was really neat. And that's a good thing to do. I would have set it up exactly the same way. Having said all that, I'm glad that I didn't do it. Because to be honest with you, I don't know. It's kind of a neat, kind of a gee whiz kind of a thing, but I'm not sure it would be really worth the effort. So I'm kind of glad that I didn't spend the time to do that. That's just my personal opinion. Some people might really think this is really great. I'm kind of like, well, when you're actually running the train on a model, railroad, and it's, you're pulling cars and you got some other diesels with it, are you really going to even see that? I don't know. But it's a cool feature, and I think it's kind of neat. My one biggest criticism of this engine is the coupler arrangement. I think it's unnecessarily complicated, and it makes it really hard to work on. I think they were probably going after trying to make the draft gearbox as close to scale as possible. And that's an admirable goal, but personally, I would rather have a draft gearbox that's easier to open and close and easier to remove from the model. Scale trains and Athearn, and they've kind of done their draft gearboxes so that they're still over scale, but it's not bad. And I think this is one of those places where, like, operation takes precedence over fidelity to scale. And again, that's just my opinion, but I would never, as much of a stickler for detail as I am, I don't want to ever put serviceability and operability under prototype accuracy. It should come first. And if you have to live with something being slightly oversized, I would rather do that personally, because it's just, this thing was so difficult to deal with in terms of the coupler height. It makes me kind of hesitant to want to buy anything from Aurora in the future, although I do like this model. So, anyway, just my 2 cents, and I think they did a pretty good job overall, though. So I don't want to mean to trash the engine. I think it's a really nice model. Let's see what we've got. The model had 2 low couplers, so I took a total of 10 points in the standards and operation category. The draft gearbox design makes fixing the coupler height extremely difficult, and the model was booby-trapped and made me bleed, so I took a total of 15 points in the rip track category. That leaves us with 75 out of 100 possible points, which earns a C. This model has a lot going for it, but it's also unnecessarily difficult to work on. I'm giving it a yellow signal. Overall, I think Aurora did a pretty good job with this model. If you're looking for some unique Canadian motive power for your HO scale layout, then I think you might like it. If you like this video, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching.